No one would dare question Niki Lauda's driving talent today, but back in 1973, and with a difficult first season on record, the Austrian still had everything to prove. And that's exactly what he did at round 6 of the championship in Monaco. Lauda showed his precision, skill and determination, qualifying his aging BRM in 6th position. Within the first few laps, he found himself running in 3rd, fending off attacks from Ferrari's Jackie Ickx. He would ultimately retire with a gearbox failure, but the performance was enough to firmly put him on the radar. And by the following Monday, Enzo Ferrari's assistant was on the phone. A trip to Maranello was in order, and the rest, as they say, is history. Ferrari's faith and the talent they saw in Lauda was rewarded with a podium in the opening round of 1974. But the real reward came in Niki's 4th race with the team, at the 1974 Spanish Grand Prix, where he proved himself a master of the slippery and difficult conditions. Lapping the whole field bar his teammate Clay Regazzoni, Lauda took his maiden Formula One victory and Ferrari's first win in over 2 seasons. It was a drive that proved his outstanding ability and one which the Austrian would later describe as the hardest of all. Ferrari regrouped, and under the leadership of Luca di Montezemolo, their partnership would prove fruitful, the Austrian taking another 14 wins over the next 3 seasons with Ferrari. Almost a decade later, and Lauda was at McLaren, driving alongside Northern Ireland's John Watson. The pair had a tough qualifying session at Long Beach in 1983 and found themselves way down the grid. But in the race, the duo's Michelin tyres came into their own, transforming their car's performance. A spectacular charge through the field saw them move up into the points, before a collision between race leaders Keke Rosberg and Patrick Tambay meant podium positions were now on the cards.
Rosberg, braking impossibly late, and he hits Tambay's Ferrari. Tambay is absolutely furious.
Lauda was the leading McLaren man, but suffering with cramp in his leg, was outbraked and overtaken by his teammate. Attrition soon meant that only one man stood between them and a McLaren 1-2, and the pair took no time in dispensing Jacques Laffite.
And John Watson, leaving his braking to the last possible moment, and outbrakes Laffite into the lead of the Long Beach Grand Prix, making it a McLaren 1-2, 2nd place for Niki Lauda now.
Watson won the Grand Prix from 22nd, the lowest winning grid position to date, with Lauda P2 after starting 23rd. A remarkable achievement that demonstrates in Formula One you should never give up. Lauda's hopes for a maiden home win took a blow at the start of the 1984 Austrian Grand Prix, the McLaren driver dropping back to 6th position after a bad start. But determined to put on a good show for the home crowd, he fought his way back. An oil slick caused race leader and McLaren teammate Alain Prost to slide off into the barriers.
And that is one of the McLarens, and that's Alain Prost.
Lauda hunted down Nelson Piquet's Brabham before finally taking the lead from the Brazilian with this daring move.
Niki Lauda takes the lead in the Austrian, his own Grand Prix, and he's on his way.
A victory now looked easy, but in the closing stages his gearbox broke and he decided to retire. But when cruising back to the pits, he realised he could nurse his car to the end, driving with only 3rd and 5th gears.
And that Niki Lauda slowing down, he's got an arm went up there. Lauda is in trouble of some sort.
Not only was he driving for Austria, he was driving for a world championship, and the effort he put in to bring the car home and get maximum points was the mark of a true champion.
Niki Lauda crosses the line, raises his hand, wins the Austrian Grand Prix.
Lauda took an emotional home Grand Prix win that day and claimed 9 points, which would eventually prove crucial to him gaining the championship later in the year. Blessed with both audacious racing ability and a razor-sharp mind, Lauda's class was evident at the 1985 Dutch Grand Prix, where he secured the last of his 25 wins in Formula One. Predicting that he would struggle to match teammate Alain Prost's pace over 1 lap in qualifying, he focused all his efforts on race setup. Starting from a lowly 10th on the grid, Lauda was up to 5th by the end of lap 1, and was leading the race by lap 33. His victory will be most remembered for the 12-lap battle with Prost. Virtually nothing separated the two McLarens from lap 60 to 72, but Lauda held on, putting his car in the middle of the tight track through the corners to keep the Frenchman behind. They crossed the line with just 0.232 seconds between them, but the Austrian had done enough to take victory. Proof, if needed, that points in Formula One are won on the Sunday. Tiny margins between Lauda and Prost were nothing new, and the 1984 season finale in Portugal witnessed a similarly tight battle. Lauda needed at least a second-place finish to take a third world title, but a run of bad luck in practice had left the Austrian starting the race down in 11th position. Meanwhile, rival Prost started second, and for everyone watching, the championship seemed a foregone conclusion in the Frenchman's favour. Lauda spent the start of the race bogged down in the midfield, before eventually finding his rhythm and beginning a brilliant charge to battle his way up to third place.
Niki Lauda trying to get up ahead and into the points and to preserve his chance of getting the World Championship. There he is. Niki Lauda passing Johansson, and now Alboreto, and Lauda had taken Alboreto. He's got the line, and yes indeed, Lauda is up into third place, only platform between him and his teammate Prost.
A late spin for Lotus's Nigel Mansell gave Lauda the second position he needed, and while Prost won the race, Lauda won the title by just half a point, the smallest winning margin in history.
There is the world champion of 1984.
On the podium, Prost was broken-hearted. But the Austrian comforted the Frenchman and predicted, rightly as it turned out, that the following year would be his turn.
He was the toughest guy to beat, as far as I know. The toughest guy, so therefore this championship is the most important one for me.
One of the greatest pole position laps of all time took place in the Eifel Mountains on the 2nd of August 1975. Driving a Ferrari 312T, Niki Lauda recorded Formula One's first sub-7-minute tour of the infamous 22.8-kilometre Nürburgring Nordschleife. Just 12 months before his fiery, life-threatening crash at the same venue, the Austrian made history by completing the daunting 172-corner lap in an incredible 6 minutes, 58.6 seconds. He would go on to lead the race until a puncture and damaged spoiler forced him to pit. But ever one to continue fighting, Lauda managed to recover and claim a podium finish. Having taken 2 years off in retirement, many had written off Lauda's speed. But after returning to Formula One for the 1982 season with McLaren, he started the United States Grand Prix West at Long Beach in second place. He was beaten into the first corner by Renault's René Arnoux, and then for lap after lap sat under his rear wing, biding his time. His opportunity to pass came when the Alfa Romeo of Bruno Giacomelli joined in the action and locked his brakes, punting into the rear of Arnoux during a three-way battle for second. Lauda was now free to reel in race leader Andrea De Cesaris, taking advantage when the Italian stumbled over a back marker on lap 16.
Lauda closes right up.
Well, he slowed him right down there. Lauda goes through.
Niki Lauda then takes the lead.
Lauda didn't put a wheel wrong for the rest of the race, guiding his McLaren around the tight and bumpy circuit to a dominant victory in only his third race back in the sport.
Niki Lauda brilliantly wins his 18th Grand Prix.
Lauda still had it. Consistency and wily calculation would bring Niki Lauda his second Formula One World Championship in 1977. His Ferrari was far from the fastest car in the field, but Lauda used all his experience and tenacity to ensure he gained as many points as possible at each race. He, more than anyone, knew that a championship is a marathon and not a sprint. A controlled performance in Germany at the Hockenheimring just 1 year on from a near-fatal crash at the Nürburgring taking the lead from teammate Jody Scheckter on lap 13 and sailing off into the distance to stamp his authority with a peerless display of high-speed driving. The win gave him more victories than any previous Ferrari driver in history, and he would go on to outscore Scheckter by 17 points and win the title with 2 races to spare. Just 6 weeks before the 1976 Italian Grand Prix, Niki Lauda had been laid in a hospital bed being read the last rites by a priest, his body horrifically burned and his lungs badly damaged following his terrifying crash at the Nürburgring. But here he was, against all medical advice, climbing into his Ferrari once more, preparing to race, blood from his wounds still staining the inside of his helmet. The ultimate competitor, Lauda knew his championship lead had been cut to just 2 points in his absence, which was the only motivation he needed to get back as quickly as possible. Incredibly, he qualified 5th and went on to finish 1 place higher in the race, even extending his championship lead as James Hunt retired. The Austrian showed courage and bravery beyond imagination in getting back into a race car, let alone driving it at maximum speed in the heat of competition. In doing so, he created one of the most incredible moments in the history of Formula One, and ensured that he'd be remembered as much for his inspirational character as for the many trophies he collected.